Well, hello, everyone. We're here with another interview, and today we are interviewing Jess. Hello, Jess.
Hello.
Tell me, when you first became interested in witchcraft, what was it that really triggered you to, or encouraged you, or sparked your interest in researching and studying witchcraft?
Okay, well, that's a throwback. I was about 12 or so when I became interested. I looked at my mother and I told her that I wanted to be a witch. And she looked at me like I was nuts. And she goes, well, you need to do your homework. Part of what really kind of threw me into it was there was a practicing witch that was working at the gas station down the street. And she was very fascinating. And she had this energy about her, and it drew me in, and I wanted to know more. But anytime that I asked more questions, the less she gave. And it made me even more interested. And thankfully, I'm very grateful for my mother, because she was and still is pretty open-minded, and she actually let me get my first book when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
I got very lucky in that department.
So you started studying when you were 12. How long ago, or how old are you now? How long ago was that?
I am now 31. I will be 32 in November.
Wow. So that's a big chunk of your life.
Yeah.
So looking back at that time, can you identify for us when you felt comfortable identifying as witch, or have you ever been comfortable identifying as witch?
There were times where I was comfortable. There were times that I wasn't. There were times that I doubted myself. And it was just a lot of questions internally on, who am I? What am I doing? All of the normal questions that someone would have coming into this, but it took me years in order to figure myself out. But during that whole entire time, I was still studying. I loved reading books. I ended up having a collection of over 75 books. And it was insane.
So how old were you when you first called yourself a witch?
I say maybe 14 or 15.
Okay.
And that was kind of a little bit of a nerve-wracking moment, but.
So when you think back to when you were really actively practicing, when you first started actively practicing, what type or what style of witchcraft were you practicing? Or how would you categorize it?
I guess you could kind of say I was more into Wicca at the time. But once I found out that there was a side for pretty much dragon magic, I was instantly drawn to it. And what really kind of threw me into that was one night after Daddy died, that I was having a very hard time sleeping or getting to sleep because I couldn't stop crying. And out of nowhere, I had a pillow by my side, by the side of my head, and one underneath. But in my distraught phase, a little green dragon, not physically manifested, but manifested in my third eye. And he was laying there. And I thought that I was hallucinating. And I rolled over away from him, and I could literally feel his energy walk over me and lay down with me for the next 3 hours until I cried myself to sleep.
Wow.
And so that is what got me drawn to them. And when I found DJ Conway's Dancing with Dragons. I found her book in a shop called the Black Cat Shop. And I instantly wanted it. I was 15 at the time. I struggled for a few years in order to really get my groundings in that, but that is what catapulted me into that.
So if we look at back at the witchcraft that you were practicing when you around the time that you felt really comfortable identifying as witch, it was more of what do you draconic witchcraft or magic or something like that?
Uh, at the time that I called myself a witch, it was just witch or Wiccan, whatever I felt comfortable at the time. I didn't really call myself any sort of draconic witch or priestess or anything of that sort until I was about 19.
Okay. Because this whole series is talking about transitions and working through transitions or periods of stagnation, can you explain to us what that transition was for you? Was it something that you were dealing with in your mundane or non-magical life, or was it just a time of stagnation? Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looked like for you?
Pretty much the transition happened through, I've always struggled with connecting with the goddess, despite my numerous attempts in order to do so. It's always been a struggle for me, and I don't know why. Like, I've connected to Carnunos from, like, pretty much the first day. But any sort of goddess aspect, it's just, I don't know what happened, but it's disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And the transition into the whole dragon realm was that it wasn't necessarily easy from the start, but once I caught on and I was capable of connecting with them on a deeper level than I could in what I was previously doing.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything in your mundane life, your non-magical life, that kind of mirrored that transition for you in your magical life? So within this your witchcraft, when you talk about not being able to connect with the goddess, but very connected to Cernunnos, was there something that was happening in your non-magical life that might have sort of reflected that sort of situation going on for you?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I know I was going through a pretty hard time at the time.
So when you got back into the practice, or when you transitioned from what you were doing through this figuring things out, and then you picked your practice back up and started practicing your craft again, how were you able to do that? What got you sort of inspired to pick up that whatever, the wands, the whatever you were using, and really get back into the practice?
It's one of those things to where I get to a point of pretty much losing myself. And one of the things that helps me to connect to myself is through my spirituality and my practice and what I do.
Mm-hmm.
The most connected that I have been is when I am actively practicing.
So how did you get yourself motivated to actually practice in the way that you really felt connected to do so?
It's going to sound really simple, but it really wasn't. It was just the more connected I felt and the more empowered that I felt, the more I was motivated in order to keep on going.
So what was the key for you? What was it that really enabled you to first sort of get that connection? Was it allowing yourself not to be confined to the goddess and the god?
Yes. And there's that. And there is also, I have so many different beliefs in my head And I know that Wicca is very diverse, but I also have my own opinions on that, on the path itself. But pretty much I've had another transition over the years, over the roughly year and a half to 2 years, and I am craving more of the raw magic in like how we as humans used to.
So, do you feel like you're still going through transition, or is that transition that we were first exploring there, um, like complete, or do you feel like you're going through a different transition? I mean,
I'm technically going through a second transition as we speak.
okay. Is this transition affecting your craft as well?
Affecting my craft, yes and no. And I say yes and no because it's one of those. I know that this can be a little bit touchy, but I'm going to touch on it anyway because it is how I view things right now. But we have, it feels like whether it's myself or just as a whole, things have gotten pretty diluted and people are kind of floating on the surface and not diving deep enough into their spiritualities, into what they are doing. But personally, for me, I'm sick and tired of floating on the surface and I want to dive deeper. I came to realize that there, especially with being solitary, there were a lot of things that I had missed that I wasn't learning, that I pretty much needed to learn if I wanted to be able to do this, if I wanted to be able to connect with myself deeper, as well as my guardians and any other energy that I wish to work with.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you, I mean, this isn't on my list of questions, but I follow you
Yes.
on Instagram, right? And I know you've been going through your own, I mean, I've seen transformation happening there for you too. And as an outsider, having some insight to your spirituality and seeing the transitions and the transformation that's taking place for you through Instagram, do you think that some of those are overlapping in some way for you?
Oh, there's been a lot of overlapping happening lately. Um, it's one of those, little bit of another backstory. Back in 2018, I pretty much hated myself, and one of my friends helped me with some shadow working, a little bit unorthodox methods, and I finally got to a point to where I accepted myself even deeper than what I had previously. And I have pretty much said fuck it and busted it on my box.
If we look at your life within the craft, the many years that you've been studying, during that time, you've gone through some of these transitions,
Mm.
these life changing things. How has that, the life changing situations for you, manifested in your craft in specific ways?
Going through my physical life of stagnation, I've had moments of stagnation after my kids have been born, and it has affected my craft to a point of like, I have had periods of like 2 years in between practicing. And eventually I get to a point of, either I'll make a comment or even my husband will make a comment of, I'm not acting like myself and I need to get back to it.
Mm. Right.
Does that answer the question?
Kind of, but I mean that actually brings up an important point, because yes, from the time I think, having children, being a mom myself, that is a major life change, right? I mean, that shifts your whole schedule, sleep schedule, eat schedule, life schedule. And you pointed out that there, for many of us, that consumes your life, taking care of children, especially when they're very young. And that can definitely bring about stagnation in a magical practice if we are not, focused on incorporating that kind of thing into our life. How is, motherhood? How is that changed your witchcraft? If it's changed, has it changed it at all? Do you feel like it's changed how you approach your work as a witch?
Yes and no. And the reason for I say that is because with having young children, my boys are 6 and 2. My youngest will be 3 next month. So I'm having to be more careful of sharp things, candles, keeping things out of reach. But I have been one who I taught myself how to be able in order to connect with my dragons even without items. And I did that on purpose for a reason. So if there are times to where I feel as though I need to connect for any sort of reason, mainly for myself and my own comfort level, I'm able in order to take a minute, even if it's going to the bathroom or hiding in a bedroom or hiding in a pantry. I can stand there, collect myself, connect for a minute, and I'll be okay. But I have to pretty much work my schedule around their schedule.
Right, right. Do you find that your craft or your practice tends to be more spontaneous or more fluid or less structured now that you have children?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Most definitely. It's one of those, I mean, pretty much anything that I do nowadays, it's unless we have an appointment, my life is very fluid, especially my spirituality.
Do you feel that that has diminished your power as witch or amplified it?
I want to say it's pretty much the same. Like it hasn't exactly gone down, but it hasn't gone up either.
Okay.
Even though there are times to where I want to dig in deep and increase that, but it's pretty much stayed the same.
Okay. No, that's an acceptable answer, obviously, too. So, how would you label your witchcraft now? Is it draconic witchcraft that you practice now, or is it something else, or?
I am still very much draconic, but I am less Wicca and more into your basic raw craft.
Okay. So what does a
If that makes sense.
yeah, no, it does. It makes perfect sense. So if we were to say, if we could take a peek at your practice now, what would that look like? And I'm just like a typical day, not, a day filled with witchcraft, or not a day totally absent, but what's just a typical practice that you would do in a day for yourself?
I don't really plan much.
Okay.
It's just I go off of what I feel is I need.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of times that when I do something, I ask, what do I need today? Or what do I need to learn today? Or, what do you have in order to show me? And that is pretty much my basic any type, any day type thing that I do. It just, it's one of those I go with the flow.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So do you see any similarities in the witchcraft that you practice today to the witchcraft you used to practice way back when?
Uh, it's one of those, again, yes and no, because there is still that large base, that large foundation that I've pretty much built for myself, plus the draconic kind of on top of that, but everything else has pretty much been changed or modified to pretty much what it is today.
Do you have any advice for other witches who may, watch this interview and are experiencing a transition or a time of stagnation? What advice would you give them?
Pretty much go with the flow. Sit down, connect with yourself. Anything that you have in your head, dump it out. Journal it, talk to a friend, talk to yourself, and don't be afraid of change. It's going to be scary, but it's one of the let it hold you back and just go with it.
That's good advice. So I want to thank you for talking with me, Jess. It was a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you all for watching this episode, and stay tuned to my channel here for more of the Becoming Witch interviews. Until next time, I love you. Blessed be.